Hey friends, in today's Learn, Teach, Learn session, I'm going to talk about the 11 laws derived from the fifth discipline book. This book is written by Peter Senge. He's the author of the book, The Fifth Discipline, The Art and Practice of Building the Learning Organization. Now, in the seminal work, Peter talks about the 5 disciplines. Let's quickly go through these 5 disciplines first and then we can dive into the 11 laws. The first discipline is personal mastery. So as individuals, we have our goals and vision for ourselves, and there is a current reality. And there's a gap between these two, gap between the vision and the reality, which creates a creative tension. So the more efforts you put in to bridge this gap, the more personal mastery you build in the process. The second principle is mental models. So as individuals, we have our own beliefs and assumptions, our own way of looking at the world. So if we are aware of our mental models, the assumptions and beliefs and experiences that we are using in deriving to conclusions, that helps. The third one is building shared vision. So if you want to form a learning organization, the basic building block is not the individual, but the team. And you need to have a common shared vision to move forward to. The fourth principle is team learning. So as I said, the basic building block for making a learning organization is teams. So teams that learn together, grow together. And the last principle, which is the hub of the book, is systems thinking. So Peter Senge basically says that you need to have a holistic view of the system. So if you're trying to solve any problem in the organization, you need to look at all the interconnections happening between the boundaries across different components of the organizations, different departments in an organization. So these are the 5 principles that Peter Senge talks about in the book. Now let's move to the 11 laws. So the very first law is today's problems are created from yesterday's solutions. So this law focuses on the part that whenever you're trying to solve any problem, take a comprehensive view of all the components, all the stakeholders involved in that situation. If you just take a piecemeal approach or just try to solve a problem by dividing it, you may be missing critical pieces. And the solution, though may seem to work initially, will end up creating problems in the future. And many times what happens is the person who came up with the original solution and the person who inherits the new problem are different people who don't have the context of why such decisions were made or what was the original problem. The second law is the harder you push, the harder the system pushes back. This reminds me of a famous quote by Edward Deming. A bad system always defeats a good person every single time. So if you are trying to solve any problem, influence is the way. If you just try to push people around, it is not going to work. You need to form collaborative partnerships. You need to persuade people, influence people into your way of thinking. You need to go slow. In fact, going faster, even though looks to be the right way, is actually counterintuitive. That's one of the laws that we will look in later. The third principle is it becomes better before it becomes worse. So alcoholics and smokers, there are trigger points, right? It could be a stress situation or it could be some other triggering point. You go and take a drink, you feel that that's going to help you, and you actually feel better in the beginning, but then you become addictive to it. It actually leads to a different set of problems that are worse than the original problem. So it becomes better before it becomes worse. So if you are implementing a new strategy or a new approach in the organization, give it some time. Try to analyze the trend. Don't claim that it is working. The next principle is the easy way out leads back in. It basically means that, as humans, we have a tendency to take the easy path. We have a tendency to look at all the options, choose the option which is least, which has least resistance or which involves least amount of efforts. Eventually, what happens is you come back in with a much bigger problem. The next one is cure is worse than the disease. Now it kind of ties back into the previous principles So whenever you're trying to devise a solution, ensure that it is not creating problems that are worse than the original problem. Now, how do you do that? The way to do that is analyze the interconnections, analyze how the different components are working together, analyze how a decision in one area is going to impact other areas. The next one is faster is slower. As I was talking earlier, what seems like the right way of going fast could end up creating problems. A quick example could be fixing defects, right? Many times as developers, when we get defects, we try to do patchwork, or because of time pressures, we just try to fix it faster. What it ends up doing is it creates more regression issues, which takes more time to fix. So it actually ends up slowing you down. So faster is slower. Counterintuitive, but true in many cases. The next principle is the cause and effect are not directly related in time and space. So a decision taken now may have some consequences that show up months later. The eighth principle is many times the small changes create the biggest changes. So, there are lever points, leverages that you can use to cause or have the biggest change, biggest bang for the buck. It's difficult to identify those leverage points. So as change agents and leaders, if you could identify those points, that's going to be much effective. The ninth principle is you can have your cake and eat it too, but not at once. So earlier, there was a misconception that either you can have quality or you can reduce the cost. So the Japanese manufacturing firms showed that you can actually build in quality. Now, once you have a quality product, the amount of QA effort that goes into the quality testing, that reduces. The consumer complaints gets reduced. There is a lot of word of mouth publicity, a lot of good positive feedback that gets generated, which actually ends up creating more revenue for you and lowering down your costs. So quality and cost, they can be both achieved if you have patience, if you look at all the pieces and don't compromise one for another. So that's one of the principles. You can have your cake and eat it too. The 10th principle is dividing an elephant does not lead to two elephants. So that's what, that's the core of the book. So if you are trying to break down the problem, and as humans, that's what we usually do. We feel that breaking down the problem into smaller chunks is going to make it easier to tackle them. And most of the times it does. But then what it also does is it basically removes the components way apart, and you miss out the interactions and influences. So it actually ends up creating more problem for you. The last law is there is no blame. So there's a famous quote. The quote is, "We have found the enemy, and the enemy is us." So, whatever decisions you are taking, whatever approaches you are taking, take responsibility for it. In his famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey talks about stimulus and response. In between, you have a choice. So you have the choice of making decisions, but once you have taken a decision, don't blame external circumstances or external situations. Own the responsibility, own the change that you have done. So these are the 11 laws that Peter Senge talks about, and all of them in a very good way talk about how we miss out on certain critical pieces, how we miss out on the dependencies and interconnections and influences that many components have in the organization. So that's my quick recap of the 11 laws. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for my next video. Thank you.